We acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging, and acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's spirit, imagination and rich history of storytelling and humour that is an inspiration for all Australians.
Hello, welcome to another year of the Bearer of Weird News. As 2021, can you believe we made it? As 2021 curbs the horizon, we will start to see the dawning of a new age, an age of extended sympathy and understanding to all of our fellow humans as we unite to destroy our common foe, billionaires. And they will continue to attempt to flee to the moon. I assume the moon's in that direction. I will be Matt Harvey for another episode, though other identities and performers will be considered for the role. Seems summer has officially begun here in Australia as I wear my traditional summer outfit, a blistering sunburn. But you know what they say in the summertime? Sun's out, melanoma's out. It's 2021, baby! A year without consequences. So before we get into it, I'd just like to remind you that if you haven't already heard, maybe this is your first episode, I do have a digital show in the Leicester Comedy Festival that is gone completely digital because of lockdown. It's called I Got Bit by a Monkey Once. It's a storytelling show and I'd love you guys to check it out if you're looking for something to do during the lockdown. It's a 55-minute show with 4 true stories and I think you'll have a good time. It'll give you certainly a good distraction while you're not doing much. And for those of you who are here in Australia and are heading to Adelaide, I do have a live with people in person. Can you believe such a thing is even possible? 2 actually, count them, 2 live shows. My storytelling show, again, I Got Bit by a Monkey Once, will be happening at the Rhino Room. And the Weird News Quiz, which for those of you who have seen the last episodes, thanks for watching those. It'll be like that, but live in person with people and an audience to hopefully enjoy the show. I'm really looking forward to getting them up and getting them out there, and I hope you can make it. I hope if you're in lockdown that you can find time to check out the Leicester Comedy Festival show. But that's not what you're here for. Let's get into it. Let's begin with some headlines, and I will once again be the bearer of weird news. Paris's socialist mayor, Anne Hidalgo, has been seen mocking the government, calling a fine for hiring too many women absurd. More specifically, the fine was given after Hidalgo hired 11 women and 5 men in 2018, breaching a national 2013 rule designed to bring about gender parity in employment. Typical hypocritical suffragette behaviour, banging on about equality, and the first chance that they get, they do the exact same thing that men do, stack the deck in their favour. Ridiculous, I say. The Paris authorities are being fined €90,000 by the Public Service Ministry, not only for breaching hiring policies, but for serious lack of imagination. Nice try, ladies, but that game is played out. We did it already. You got to get your own shtick at this point. New Year, New Australia. So from January 1st, 2021, the second line of Australia's national anthem will change from "For we are young and free" to "For we are one and free." The change is heralded as an important symbolic gesture as it encompasses all Australians and means that we are no longer leaving out Australia's most undervalued community, old people. Old people might be afraid that this acknowledgement of oneness might mean some major changes to the face and culture of Australia. But we still have the line, for those who've come across the seas with boundless plains to share, that we will be failing to live up to. So don't worry, plenty for us to fail. Seems kangaroos in zoos and sanctuaries are using body language to ask humans for help, much like horses and dogs do, which suggests that even wild animals can learn to communicate with humans just by being around them. Australians, of course, have known this for years, having recorded it in a documentary series, Border Force.
thinking across the border.
Problem, of course, is that they learn to imitate those that they've been around. Boundless planes to share? I don't think so. The CDC wants to encourage giving people vaccinated for COVID-19 buttons. A very good, not at all bad idea with no historical precedent, because nothing bad has ever happened from a government handing out badges for people to wear to distinguish them from other groups. Speaking of history, a man named Adolf Hitler has swept to victory in regional elections in Namibia, which really does bring home the importance of name recognition to be in local politics or regional genocide. Adolf Hitler Unona, which is a name I know that I've messed up and I apologize, he beat his opponent 1,196 votes to 213. His opponent, Corona Vlad the Impaler pedophile ring, look, it's a family name, it's not his fault, thought the election was in the bag because who's gonna vote for Hitler? In the UK, new, lightweight trains powered by human waste could soon be running on lines reopened under government plans to reverse railway cuts. Now, a lot of people must think that this technology already exists and that they are helping by providing fuel for the train. But let me tell you now, Trevor, you're not helping. They will be turning the new trains into a cost-effective super economy class where the poorest commuters are crowded onto the poop trains to get to their destinations. The only way you could make it more fuel efficient is to make it so that it actually gives back to the grid is if it ran on existential despair. A top US official has said that China has done human testing on members of the People's Libertarian Army in hope of both developing soldiers with biologically enhanced capabilities and liberating them from the constraints of being merely human. What you need to understand is China only lets a few foreign films in the country per year, and so they only just got Captain America, but it seems like they really liked it. They've just taken to the idea. John Ratcliffe, the Director of National Intelligence, included the explosive claim in the acclaimed scientific journal, A Long Wall Street Journal op-ed, where he said, "There are no ethical boundaries to Beijing's pursuit of power." In 2019, 2 American scholars wrote a paper examining China's ambitions to apply biotechnology to the battlefield, including what they said were signs that China was interested in using gene editing technology to enhance human performance. And perhaps soldier performance? Perhaps. Look, if their soldiers aren't human, what are they? And that seems, to me, to be the debate. If a soldier is enhanced beyond the point of human capacity, can they still be classified as humans? And do the regular laws for humans still apply? Oh, sure, you do have the complicated business of doing some dubious science to them initially in their human form to make them more human than human, but much like an American upheld democracy in the Middle East, at first you've got to do some questionable things, but once you get past that tricky business, the results really speak for themselves. A group of American scientists and designers have developed a concept for a grow-your-own steak kit using human cells and blood to question the ethics of the cultured meat industry. Ouroboros steaks, named after the snake that eats itself, is stated by the creators as not technically being cannibalism. I mean, the steak may be an art project, but crimes tend to have much less loose interpretations. This is certainly, by all known definitions, most definitely cannibalism, unless they're eating the Chinese super soldiers or maybe people on welfare. Most governments don't consider those to be human by any definition. Labor says that Australians stranded overseas wanting to come home are being quietly reclassified in an attempt to avoid bad headlines over Scott Morrison's failure to return them by Christmas. At first they were being reclassified as Christmas presents, in the hope that Santa Claus would pick them up and deliver them by mistake. But now they're being reclassified as refugees and will be sent back if they try to enter the country. Jair Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil, has been named the Organised Crime and Corruption Reporting Project's 2020 Person of the Year for his role in promoting organised crime and corruption, which is quite a get for this year. Contenders for the title included Rodrigo Duterte, Donald Trump, and Recep Erdogan, but Bolsonaro cleaned up the competition, winning by a Brazilian votes. I'm happy with that. One half of the name of the company and grandpa, who is the avatar of living a one-star behaviour lifestyle, Jerry Harvey. Ooh, hush children, hush, hush, hush. At least wait for me to say what it is first before we get into the boobs. Jerry Harvey, no relation by the way, has put Harvey Norman under fire by asking for people to volunteer as sales staff. This flyer was posted in The School Locker, a local newspaper which went to at least one school asking for volunteers to help because their stores are so busy they need extra help. That's right. Boom! Feed the hatred. Hey, Harvey, this isn't a nursing internship. You want someone to experience the dehumanizing nature of retail? The least you can do is pay them for their loss of dignity as they smile their way through having a Karen unload on them about how the company is so shit. You think they don't know that? They have to work there. Labour unions and the Morrison government have clashed repeatedly in an escalating battle over proposed industrial relations changes that are the most significant since the Howard government's work choices in 2005. In addition to worse pay deals, unions have raised concerns about wages and conditions to be cut and undermined and job security, warning that workers can be labelled casuals with no right to arbitration. These changes are proposed as a temporary measure to help bolster the post-COVID economy. Because let's be honest, nothing boosts the economy like thousands of people losing secure hours and pay for up to 2 years. Hey, don't take it up with me. This is backed up by history. Nothing has motivated people more than being treated poorly. You want peasants to have workers' rights? Fine, just clamp down on them for a few decades. Maybe work a couple of them to death, or merely a light maiming. Soon enough, they will revolt. They will rise up and fill the vacuum of a missing revolution. Need your workers to work after months of inactivity? Fine. Simply destroy the stability of their workplace for a few years. Soon enough, your workers will be motivated to find the jobs. Strike leaders, frontline protesters, organisers, flyer distributors, there are so many jobs to be had. New laws, to emphasise a healthcare response rather than a law enforcement one, may mean that being drunk in public will no longer be a crime in Victoria. I mean, not that it was ever heavily enforced, just ask 18 to 30-year-old Matt. He would confirm, but he was too drunk to remember. The Police Association of Victoria called the plan all press release and no policy. I mean, it certainly lacks the political suave that the police's current policy of strike first, ask questions after becoming a YouTube star only. But the association secretary Wayne Gatt said that it will place additional pressures on our doctors and nurses and our emergency departments, which will replace police in dealing with drunk and violent people. The Police Association wants the government to clarify which services will replace the work of police in getting drunk people off the street. Who will be doing the beating? How hard? And will the police then have to administer the healing, as the doctors will have taken the difficult job of swinging a billy club into a crowd without consideration for health and well-being? Because this is additional weapons training for doctors and medical training for police officers, and that's going to cost the taxpayer a pretty penny. Streaming services such as Netflix and Amazon Prime may have to meet Australian content requirements under a federal government proposal to help local production. Communications Minister and man regretting watching the latest creation by Chris Lilly, Paul Fletcher, has released media reform plans in light of fears some providers could collapse due to the rise of online streaming. Public feedback is being sought on the plan until March 7th of this year. I expect that we can expect to uncover a feedback scandal where millions and millions of bots will be requesting more Chris Lilly shows. I mean, you can expect maybe 30 more seasons of Neighbours and 4 more versions of Underbelly. That seems to be everything that we put together these days. This cry out for Australian content is reassuring from a Liberal minister, though I do suspect that if they wanted to create more Australian content, they should probably stop defunding the ABC. Space news now! Man so tired of risking the lives of his workers on Earth that he is determined to move them to Mars, Elon Musk has inadvertently given us an early glimpse of what such a future Mars society would look like. Because an unusual suggestion was noticed buried inside the user agreement for SpaceX's Starlink satellite internet service, which just goes to show what happens when you run out of things to watch on Netflix. People need anything to do, and it seems someone turned to reading user agreements. The following phrase is what was found. For services provided on Mars or in transit to Mars via Starship or other colonization spacecraft, the parties recognize Mars as a free planet, and that no Earth-based government has authority or sovereignty over Martian activities. Accordingly, disputes will be settled through self-governing principles established in good faith at the time of Martian settlement. And it's just nice to see someone with a singular vision to follow through no matter what it takes and no matter how heavy the boot of oppression gets. Moving on to white-collar crime news. Australia, the only country with the linguistic courage to still use the word "girt" in its national anthem. But within that linguistic avatar of punching a Nazi in the dick, there is a party who is brave enough to stand up to big business. The Greens. The Greens have created an amendment to an anti-money laundering counter-terrorism financing bill which was debated recently. Labor, the Coalition and the crossbench senators will have to decide, are they owned by the powerful property accountancy and legal industries or not? Nathan Lynch, a financial crime intelligence expert at Thomson Reuters, said that Australia has become a sink for the illicit wealth of some of the Pacific region's worst kleptocrats, and it should horrify all Australians. And as an economic strategy, well, it seems this may be the way to go. The majority of tax havens look exactly like Australia. Warm islands with no possible way to otherwise sustain themselves as an economy. And as we all know, Australia has taken a hard left turn away from the only thing capable of keeping it afloat at the moment, coal. We are Daniel Plainview, and this is There Will Be Coal, baby!
I drink your milkshake!
But we have taken the radical step of moving away from coal at the equally radical pace of the next 30 years. Look, I look forward to celebrating my 70th birthday and subsequent retirement party by dying, knowing that the world has finally been stripped of the menace of Australian coal. As I fade away into nothingness, the weight of a generational burden not so much lifted, but shifted onto the next generation. It does make life much simpler. We did toy with the idea of slipping into weapons manufacturing, hoping for that late-in-life redemption story, like Tony Stark. But we instead bought 12 submarines for $225 billion. And when none of them could defeat the menace of paperwork, let alone an alien armada, we got sad that we will never find Harold Holt at the bottom of the sea and make a major motion picture starring Harold from Neighbours. Australia has received numerous warnings over its failure to clamp down on money laundering, including from the OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, in 2017, and the International Monetary Fund in 2019. Warnings I look forward to us adhering to just as soon as we finish building our armada of submarines. One step at a time, eh? The government can only do so much at any given point, and it is very much stuck on this submarine thing. And now we have Machine, sent back from the future to assassinate John Connor by killing the human race in its entirety by refusing to follow through with a green lead recovery. Matthias Cormann, who has come under fire for promising a green lead recovery, but only if he gets the OECD top job when he leaves the coalition. Seems he is a very advanced robot, as he is not destroyed by the logical paradox that the coalition government used every opportunity it could to undermine every initiative to tackle climate change, even seemingly to revel in the possibility of it happening, as it will mean a steady stream of cheap, fruit-picking labour.
It was a good meeting. Where was it? Was the time doesn't mean anything when you're about to be, have water lapping at your ears.
And that he was finance minister in a government that failed to act on money laundering despite warnings from the very same OECD who he wants a job at. Perhaps the argument would be that he's the perfect person for the job, in the same way that the FBI or the CIA or other government agencies take on people like hackers and other non-government criminals to undermine the very criminal enterprises that they were propping up, only one mere arrest ago. He has an ability to dodge warnings, much like Catherine Zeta-Jones training for a heist. It is a pretty devious way to get a job. Who actually knows better than Matthias what he has done, step by step, to avoid the suffocating red tape of not aiding criminals in their endeavours to not help pay for public services that they themselves benefit from? Nathan Lynch says, financial crime is a global catastrophe, with some 2 trillion a year being laundered, of which only 1% is detected and seized. And on top of that, huge percentage of taxpayer funding is being increasingly loudly laundered through grants to sports teams in safe Liberal seats. But like the PM and the Treasurer billing taxpayers almost $5,000 for a private jet to future face of the Murdoch empire and body that the mind of Rupert Murdoch will inhabit when he finally manages the hypnotherapy brain transplant technique that we saw in Get Out, Lachlan Murdoch's Christmas party. You know, sort of like that event. And the story that seems to be going on longer than the peacekeeping mission in the Middle East, Greedy Gladys and her backing band of uncorruptibles. Premier Berejiklian has come out in front of any accusations of hypocrisy and thus any possibilities of blowing up the logic circuits of her heartless robots that form the coalition by mounting this incredible saying, the quiet part out loud argument that pork barreling is not illegal. I mean, it's always a bad time when your only legal recourse that you have left is what is known as the Air Bud defense.
You check in your rule book, but you won't find anything in there that says a dog can't play.
He's right. Ain't no rule said the dog can't play basketball.
Well, there isn't a rule that says that you can't do it. But let me put it to you, Gladys. Your politicians were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. Classic Jurassic Park problem. I mean, I have a theory as to why they have failed to crack down on money laundering. A little closer. A little closer. What's that? What's that? You can't? Oh, okay. Well, you stay there then. I'll come closer. I think that the New South Wales government is laundering cartel money I don't know which cartel, as we are rather remote out this way, but likely it's just oil and coal cartels. Occam's razor is usually the best to shave with, which would explain the shredding of documents at the centre of New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian's grant controversy being recovered by a forensic data search team. Either that or Underbelly is getting desperate for new spin-offs, although if it does go ahead, I suspect this will quickly be defunded of any and all Australian support for not being on Team Australia. I mean, how can you not jump to the conclusion that they are laundering cartel money when a secret report has brought to light that a highly contaminated block of land near Parramatta bought by the New South Wales government for $53.5 million has been found to be worth between -3 and -7 million dollars. Not to mention the overspending of the $27 million on land worth only $3 million on land for the Western Sydney Airport, and that the New South Wales government buying land for 3 times its value for a light rail project. The insulting part is that they aren't even trying to be subtle. At least Walter White went to the trouble of setting up that bug spray business to launder his vast amounts of cash. And if I've learnt nothing else from Ozark, construction is a great way to falsify spending records. I mean, it's certainly less suspicious than giving your oldest and most supportive mouthpiece, Rupert Murdoch's Foxtel, a $10 million federal grant without a plan whatsoever on how to spend it. That wouldn't be suspicious at all. I mean, I applied for a federal grant. I mean, not for this, of course, don't worry. I know the government won't pay for this. I mean, I had a budget, I had a whole plan, I had everything. Maybe I need to be angrier towards anyone who isn't the Liberal government in order to get some of that sweet, sweet government money. I mean, what values do I need to compromise to be considered? Let's see, let's look over my notes here. I certainly shouldn't mention that Michael West Media has stated in a Senate inquiry in 2015 that News Limited was identified as Australia's #1 tax risk. Let's cross that out there. And best not mention that there is no sign of the government's $30 million grant to Foxtel in the accounts of this particular Foxtel entity. That'd definitely get me on the naughty list, so don't you go snitching now. Let's see, best get rid of this right here that clarifies that the latest economic updates confirm Australia's economy is declining as an ever-increasing rate under current policies that won't play well. That the Morrison government is consolidating its place in history as Australia's worst ever economic manager and among the worst in the developed world. Better get rid of that. I need that grant money. So, this is just in. Yeah, this is breaking news, guys. Breaking news. This is just in. The Greens are causing fires, and Labor has mismanaged the coronavirus quarantine in all states, even the ones run by Liberal premiers, because in those states it's actually deep state actors who are just trying to make the Liberals look bad, who are compromising the gold standard held by the New South Wales Liberals. Is that enough? Can I get that grant money now? See? It's all gone. Civil War news now. America. The land so desperate to avoid coming up with new ideas, it's opted to reboot an old favourite IP, Civil War. Trump. I mean, do I even need to make a joke at this point? Trump has activated his insurrectionist tribe like a reject shop winter soldier saying his trigger words, "I am the Eggman, cuckoo, cuckoo." Now, normally we have a strong focus on Australia and Australian news, with the occasional diversion into the bizarre or the easily made fun of from other places. But if we have learned nothing else from the past, it is that when America goes to war, Australia follows, eagerly, like that little dog following the bulldogs in the Looney Tunes cartoons, or like a whimpering island nation hoping that the bully will protect us from another school bully who comes for us, even if it means that we have to do some morally compromising acts as a show of solidarity. Cool. As the perfectly legal election results have led to staunch, some may say delusional, Trump supporters to storm the White House in an attempt to follow the orders of their commander-in-chief.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Seems civil unrest is the new democracy, or rather, who has the most soldiers, and what do those soldiers say democracy is? Well, that's the definition of democracy now. Yes, that's the definition. After all, language is fluid and words get new meanings all the time. Isn't that right? Irregardless and literally. The violence had one real intention: to halt the tallying of the Electoral College votes to affirm Joe Biden's victory. With a box of ballots coming perilously close to being destroyed, according to Senator Jeff Merkley, in what will no doubt be remembered not as a riot, but rather as a few thousand lone wolf attacks that happened to coincide on the same day at the same time, as there was definitely a fair few of them who didn't really know why they were there. Some being there to get like-worthy selfies for their social media. And to be fair, it is getting harder and harder to get something that will cut through, especially since we started turning against gender reveals. What are we supposed to do now? We're not made out of content. Others were attempting to improve their fitness regime with a new spin on the Presidential Fitness Challenge. And some who just thought it was a great old time out. They were just there to hang out with their buds.
Why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol! It's a revolution!
That delivery is given with less enthusiasm than I've heard people announce that they are heading to pre-drinks. And pre-drinks isn't even the main event. This was the main event, guys. These lone wolves gathered on the Capitol steps wielding flags including Make America Great Again, Liberty or Death, Don't Tread on Me, and the Pro-South Confederacy, all expected messages, if I'm honest, and styles of flags, right? You'd expect the Confederate flag at this sort of march. Others, however, bafflingly, were carrying the flag of the United States, seemingly having forgotten that the U in USA does in fact mean united, making it a gesture so littered with irony it could form the Great Pacific Irony Patch. And these guys, they'd have to go and live there because they are so fond of telling people if they don't love America, then they should leave. And it looks a lot like not loving America to me when you storm the Capitol building. It's a weird time in the piece to acknowledge that we have a similar goal in life, because many of us who ended up supporting, others of us who voted for Joe Biden, didn't actually want him to become president either. We just didn't want the other guy even more. He's the presidential avatar of compromise. His campaign slogan should have been, "I'm sorry too." And he still would have been voted in. He still would have won by an amazing margin. He may even have got more votes. So what happens next? Well, much like Vietnam, Korea, the Middle East, and the Middle East, As America goes to war, so does Australia, as a good ally and to fulfill its obligations being a NATO partner country, and this being a clear emerging security challenge. Australia will be bound to come to the defence of America from America. But the question is, which America will we defend? No matter which America we choose, someone's not going to be happy. Scott Morrison has yet to directly blame Trump for his continued insistence on being Donald Trump, and clowns like George Christensen are actually defending the violence, whereas Labour are likely keen to throw down with Joe Biden, and the Greens, they have their own old white man that they want to put in power, Bernie Sanders. So it's a bit of a three-way civil war, having a flow-on effect, causing Australians to be drawn into their own little lines of support, causing us to have our own civil war, meaning that Australia and America are now in a war with Australia and America, and furthering the need for NATO countries and partners to get involved, so then they have to decide which political ideology they're going to support, and it's just a whole complicated mess. In the spirit of being nice, a spirit that is definitely overrated in this situation, people are already trying to give him credit for something. Anything, really. In this case, it is the delusion that Trump was the least warmongering president the country has had in years. A statement that in and of itself is not even slightly true, as he came close to unintentionally starting conflicts with North Korea, Iran, and Venezuela. And if the definition of bringing peace is being so bad at starting a war that you accidentally failed to do so, is grounds for being categorized as not a warmonger, then I gotta say I am the least warmongering podcast host for failing to pull troops out of the war on Christmas, narrowly avoiding the war on Easter, getting into harsh words and almost causing a war on New Year's, and just barely avoiding the war on Shrove Tuesday. Look guys, it's been a bit of a weird year. Though he might live up to the statement that he often claims that he is like Lincoln.
I said, not since Abraham Lincoln has anybody done what I've done for the black.
As he will be one of the very few presidents to have caused a civil war. Also, he has a silly adornment on his head all the time. Got him. After giving a speech in which he said he would lead the march to the Capitol building, he was like the monorail guy, deceiving them with a bit of a song and a dance as he went home and led from the rear, the extreme rear of his Twitter feed. Trump tweeted that Vice President Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. The only true statement that Trump may have made his entire presidency, as Pence has continuously failed to put a stop to the dangerous actions Trump has brought forth onto the country. These actions have led to 3 of his honorary doctorates being revoked, because I know that you are curious like I was, and I spent a good portion of time looking this up. They were doctorates in business admin, laws, and humane letters, which is generally given to those who have distinguished themselves in humanitarian and development professionalism. So this is completely understandable why they took it from him. But why they waited until 2021, that's the real kicker. I mean, they removed his business admin degree in 2015, but he was still in a business, the business of scamming people. Though, unsurprisingly, the unimaginatively named Liberty University has so far refused to remove his honorary doctorates in business admin and laws. Though education doesn't seem to really be a big concern of his, so losing a few degrees would be akin to the rest of us taking a hard night on the drinks. We might come back a few brain cells light, but it's nothing that we're going to miss really. The real kicker came when Twitter finally permanently banned Trump from the platform. Cries went out over social media as more and more platforms have banned the unhinged former president. Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat have all temporarily locked his accounts. Fortunately though, he was also banned from being interviewed on the news, making public appearances and rallies, and addressing an entire nation as its leader. So really, should be a quiet 2021. I do expect, however, that Trump's inevitable TikTok account is going to be a real mess. And I think I'm here for it. I'm not sure. According to Politico, he was scrambling to figure out what his options were. The media outlet said that he hinted that building his own platform might be the one avenue that they pursue in a now deleted tweet from the official @POTUS account. This is a mild swing from where we expected him to go, following the Trump TV plan he floated prior to winning the election in 2016. A Trump social media platform can't be any worse than the ones that we already have. Just a dubious con to exploit its users and enrich the owner. It actually just sounds like the inevitable destiny of a lifelong con man like Trump. Mitch McConnell has called the actions a failed insurrection. And when Mitch McConnell is not backing your undermining of and attempting to destroy democracy, you know you're on the wrong side of history. He did, however, go on to say that the Republicans were already in the middle of their own coup, and this much louder and much more obvious coup is really putting a wrench in their plans. For those asking the very obvious question of where the tanks were at the US Capitol riot, police said that they were caught off guard. Basically, their tanks were in the shop. I mean, they weren't expecting to have to use them until Black History Month in February. Though they seem to have found first gear since then, having achieved the arduous task of identifying people who weren't even trying to hide their identities, were live streaming themselves taking part of the event, and were on the front page of every major newspaper around the world, posing for a photo that they will attach to their Eurovision audition tape for the band ACAF. All cops are friends. They have found and arrested alt-right Jamiroquai, Hannibal Lecter, this guy who put his feet on Nancy Pelosi's desk and delivered a nasty note that he probably could have just emailed, as it was just as much chance of getting to her that way. This guy who seemed to not realise what time the riot was starting and just threw on whatever he had at hand. And this guy who was photographed climbing this rail that he could have just walked around, with who is apparently his mother, who he was kind enough to give a bulletproof vest to, and who says that nobody gives good Mother's Day presents anymore. And it's just nice to see that he managed to fit in family time while attempting to undermine the democracy of his country. No doubt, a poignant biopic will be made of the two of them, titled "Stop the Count, or My Mother Will Shoot." Tax deduction news now. A discussion paper is calling for stakeholders' views on whether tax deductions on education and training expenses unrelated to a person's current job could support their future employment. In this case, stakeholders is company jargon for you, dear listener. It's your chance to get involved with the future of your taxes directly, aside from hiding them in offshore tax havens, of course. The paper from the Treasury says, people no longer expect a job for life and may have multiple careers over their lifetime. The increased rate of globalization and the technological change and changing nature of work and the labour market are among the forces driving the need for continued upgrading of skills throughout life. Something that we didn't need a paper from Treasury to confirm. We could have just asked the 106 people for every one job that currently exists if they think that they might be changing jobs anytime in the near future. As you are no doubt aware, currently Australians can only access tax deductions on study and materials related to their current field of work, the expectation being that further training increases career progression and therefore income. The policy idea aims to boost Australians' employability and income security by diversifying their skills and was announced as an initiative to be consulted on in the 2020-2021 budget in October. not discussed was the possibility of reducing costs of studying altogether, because that might actually help people, and we really only need the appearance of helping people. Or, if you can really swing it, then something that helps people with money but is fundamentally inaccessible to any poor person, like, say, a tax deduction. Or, as the paper goes on to say, mouthy piece that it is, low-income earners, including those outside the workforce with little or no income tax liability, would not benefit from a new income tax deduction, which really seems to be the coalition's preferred method of helping those on little to no income in no way at all. Organisational behaviour expert Anne Brewer told AAP that she was concerned that the government's proposal would exacerbate the gap between the haves and the have-nots, or as it is known in the parlance of the haves, between the haves and the, oh, you live here? How nice for yous. Research into what kind of training works overwhelmingly indicated that reskilling was best achieved when it was employer-sponsored on-the-job training, followed closely by just any kind of training, a subscription to Skillshare, some mild pointing at a building where jobs were thought once to have existed, and finally by people passing you in the street and berating you to get a job and stop sponging off the system. And if things get bad enough, you can always reskill as a snitch for the local police and inform on local dealers, because snitches get riches. University of Sydney Business School John Buchanan said there was more demand than ever for Australians to have complex skills to make them employable in the long term. If they could develop the skill to not need to eat, take toilet breaks, get injured either physically or emotionally, and in a pinch be able to do complex calculations at a rapid pace with a 0.0001% margin of error, that'd be great. A set of skills that they might be able to acquire if the prohibitive costs of going to a cyborg school were cut back to an affordable amount. And if the government had spent more time in the last decade investing in the cyborg industries rather than their sponsorship of chimney sweeping memorial school of outdated jobs, concepts, and economic stabilizers. Buchanan went on to say, the types of work that Australians do had changed dramatically in 3 decades, illustrating the need for improvement in this area. Mostly this is due to the loss of the formerly booming go-go 90s e-industry, where Australia, thinking the boom time would never end, invested heavily in a surplus of the letter E to put in front of businesses in order to make them more profitable. And now we have to store them in the same place that we put all of our national shames, alongside complaints about the treatment of Indigenous people and the Ark of the Covenant, a place where nobody will see them again, guarded by top men. Professor Buchanan said that he doubted the government knew how best to give people the right mix of skills because it had already shown an instrumental approach to further education. Instrumental because they'd made a lot of noise but said no words. And if you want to join the cacophony of sound and fury, responses to the discussion paper can be made via email at selfedconsultation@treasury.gov.au. It's on the screen. I will put it on the screen at some point because I did not read that right. But they have to be put in by January 22nd, so please hurry and have your voice heard, because this is the future of your education and your taxes on the lines. On to something a little less serious. Let's talk about drugs news. It's 2021 and the hottest new government trend is embracing marijuana as both our distraction and saviour. We've come a long way from the careful days of Bill, I never inhaled Clinton, being the bad boy of drug use in politics. Now all sorts of politicians are openly confessing to having hit the hashish, having played first chair in the wind section of the homemade orchestra. Your friend and mine, Sweet Mary Jane. Where do we start our mind-expanding journey into the lungs of darkness? Let's light up. NBA. The NBA has suspended random marijuana testing for the 2020-2021 season. NBA spokesman Mike Bass said, "Due to the unusual circumstances in conjunction with the pandemic, we have agreed with the NBPA to suspend random testing for marijuana for the 2020-2021 season and focus our random testing program on performance-enhancing products and drugs of abuse. This season will put to bed whether or not marijuana really is a performance-enhancing drug, as it will be the lowest scoring season, but the players will be so confident during the games that they do actually manage to show up to." And let's hit it again! The United Nations, an intergovernmental organization that aims to maintain international peace and security, develop friendly relations among nations, achieve international cooperation, and be the center for harmonizing the actions of nations. Yeah, sounds like that was created while bombed out on a heady mix of herbs and spices, if you follow my meaning. Following a recommendation from the World Health Organization, the United Nations Commission for Narcotic Drugs voted to remove cannabis from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. An amazing decision that will impact a lot of lives, plus it makes sitting around and getting yelled at by children for their obvious inadequacies as an organization, sitting around and just talking shit with your international mates is so much more interesting when you got a little buzz going. Puff puff give, don't bogart that news, let's hit it again! Illinois, a state I know nothing about except how to pronounce it, and that's mostly because of Sufjan Stevens. Still waiting for those albums about the remaining states, buddy. Oh, what's that? They aren't happening. That was an overly ambitious project to begin with, and really probably shouldn't have been committed to in the first place. Free advertising's a hell of a drug, eh? Anyway, Illinois has started the new year in a positive light by expunging nearly 500,000 marijuana arrest records. The move follows Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker signing legislation in 2019 legalizing recreational marijuana use in the state starting in 2020. The expanse legislation also paved the way for 770,000 state residents to be eligible for expunging marijuana-related offences. Pritzker initially estimated that it would take 4 years to start getting records expunged, but announced that nearly 500,000 had already been tossed going into 2021. And people say that marijuana makes you lazy. I have never seen a government move at such a rapid pace. Makes me think the old governor has a little something something that he doesn't want anyone to know about in his own past. Well, that's all I can handle for one episode. I'm going to take a little nap and sleep off the encroaching paranoid thoughts before continuing the search for that elusive gateway that marijuana is supposed to lead me through. Maybe I'll ask Alice. I think she'll know. And finally, while humanity is falling apart, maybe it is time to cozy up to its inevitable replacement. It's AI news. Robots have a bit of a bad reputation for trying to take the jobs of everyone. Robots have written music, worked in factories, taken over supermarket cashiers, warehouse packers, bartenders, ice cream makers, travel agents, soldiers, and many others. They have a more mixed resume than a philosophy graduate struggling with his own purpose in the world. And now, they are closing in on another job, as 2 of Australia's unions are turning to artificial intelligence to help workers stand up for their rights. Frankly, this is a smart play by robots. The reason humanity is scared of robots is because of negative depictions in the media. And this is their big chance to show people that they aren't the beasts that they have been made out to be. And what better way to get on the human side by defending workers in Australia's hospitality industry. If nothing else, over this lockdown period, we have proven that we will do anything, absolutely anything, to not have to cook for ourselves, even if it means putting other people's health and safety in unacceptable risk. Hospitality workers can now get easy access to information about pay, hours, and help with bullying on sexual harassment claims via the AI-powered Mobilise app, a collaboration between Hospo Voice and the Australian Council of Trade Unions, which has already helped some workers receive thousands of dollars in back pay, leading to the most boring but socially progressive chapter of the Terminator series, Terminator 7 Admin Day. Jules Gibbon, 35, is a chef in Melbourne. She volunteers behind the scenes of the app and recently helped win back more than $10,000 in unpaid wages for a woman in her 50s. She has, however, failed to get the app to help her receive the money that she very rightly deserves for helping people find their money and their stolen wages. I feel like she should get a percentage of what she helps find. I feel like if it's good enough for Gordon Legal, it's good enough for this app. When the pandemic hit, the business of this 50-year-old woman got JobKeeper, and people started to realise that despite all the claims that they were one of the family, they were being treated poorly, and just how much she had been underpaid. Which is always a hard day when you realise how much you're being underpaid. Which, if I'm being honest, is actually what the business meant when they said that she was one of the family. I mean, it would be that you'd work for free, like a kid in a milk bar, or like for a little bit of cash off the books, or maybe for a discount, the family discount, because we're all family here. Come on, you gotta help me out. Gibson said, because JobKeeper came through, it meant a lot of businesses had to become legitimate or try to be more legitimate with their paperwork, which is an unusual twist because generally once government money starts getting involved, businesses get discovering that they have headquarters that they forgot about in Ireland or the Cayman Islands somewhere. But in order to outsmart us, they are going to have to teach these robots the difference between mimicry and independent thought, a lesson that both major parties could learn as they dance around the same 7 ideas in a vague attempt to appear like they have fresh ideas, in an even vaguer attempt to appear more human than the last government. MIT Technology Review thinks that robots can do better than governments and is putting its money where its criticism is, reporting that scientists from Facebook, which, let me just say, the fact that Facebook has scientists on staff gives off proper secret lab controlling the future vibes. But hey, they have an on-site barbershop so that you don't ever have to leave. Ever. But Facebook and the Georgia Institute of Technology dropped an algorithm into the middle of a role-playing game in order to train the AI to use language with intent. Because if there's one subgroup of humans who is famous for clear communication and not being unreasonable with regards to excluding people from joining in, it is gamers. They also wanted to teach them what impact the words may have in the real world. As seen here in this clip of an AI responding after calling you a bad name.
I know now why you cry.
The idea being that by giving the AI a specific quest to complete, that they could teach it to pursue goals like a human gamer, and maybe even move toward a deeper understanding of language. It is important that AI learns how to use language if it is going to seamlessly blend in with the workforce and not just look like 2 computer screens in a trench coat trying to buy tickets to one of your human moving picture shows. And that is the end of the news for this week. This episode, I rarely come out weekly. That's the end of the news for this episode. Thank you so much for hanging around and for listening if you've made it all the way to the end. I really appreciate your time, your continued giving of time if you've come back. And if you're new, I appreciate you coming down and trying something new. If you enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with a friend, sending it to any places that you think would enjoy it, and liking, subscribing, all the things. You know what it is that people ask you to do. But mostly, I feel like if you want to support the show, if you want me to be able to do these things more often, the best way to do that is to help me do my live shows. If they're financially successful, then I will have more time to do these things because I won't have to show up at my job as often. So if you could support my live shows, come out to the Adelaide Fringe shows if you're in Adelaide, if you know anyone in Adelaide. Watch the live show from the Leicester Digital Festival, because you don't even need to live in Leicester, but you can pick up a show for just a couple of pounds. I think it's only £5 to watch the entire show. But if I'm in your area, if I'm in your town, if I'm doing a festival, or if you see me on the bill of a stand-up show, please come and check it out. I'd love to be able to perform for you more, and I'd love to do this way more often, because this is good fun. And I enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy it. And look after yourselves, wash your hands, do all those sort of things. We are so close to getting some vaccines. Let's just be sensible for a little bit longer. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.